This is Jane Elliott, and she has seen it all. Hitler's rise, his fall, Korea, Vietnam, JFK, shot, the Beatles, Elvis, perestroika, and this, Martin Luther King at the peak of his powers, most likely on his way to becoming America's first black president, gone down in broad daylight. On April the 4th, 1968, while some of her friends and colleagues were laughing, rejoicing that the troublemaking n***a got what he deserved, Jane Elliott snapped. No, she did not take part in protests, nor was she part of any sit-ins. Impossible for a white suburban mother of four and schoolteacher from a small town in Iowa. Locked arms and we shall overcome marches were never a serious possibility for Jane. So she did something very different. Very, very different. She weaponized her power, her privilege, and waged an all-out war on white America with something she called the blue eye test. You have to see it to believe it. And you will, because the True Black channel got in touch with Jane for an interview. And when Mrs. Elliott, with a wit and mind sharper than most 20-something-year-olds, got back to me, I knew it was destiny. What you're about to hear is nothing short of a 90-minute revelation, during which Jane Elliott exposed some of the best and worst aspects of humanity to me. She took no prisoners. Not even this man was safe from her razor-sharp tongue. In fact, in this interview, you'll see for yourself why Donald T. Rump, as she calls him, has banned her books and speeches in schools and campuses across America. Jane Elliott is that dangerous, even today at the young age of 92. First, however, a warning. If you're watching this on the True Black channel, welcome. But know this. This interview is not for the faint-hearted. Neither is it for those who want to be shielded from the uncomfortable truths of history. Things get real dark, real quick. This goes for even my regular viewers, the unstoppable Trill Nation. So, for this reason, my interview with Jane cuts out right before she gets a little bit darker and more serious. But not to worry. For those of you who can handle the full, undiluted and uncut version of what she had to say, you must go to Trill Black's sister channel, my second channel, Melanin Intel. That's Melanin Intel. Link in the description below. Just one more thing. While you're over at Melanin Intel, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe, just as you would on the Trill Black channel. Because over at Melanin Intel, the revolution will be televised. From Kush to Compton, and without further ado, the inimitable, the ever dangerous Jane Elliott. Right, I'll just say for the record, I have an incredibly special person with me this evening. Possibly the greatest individual I've interviewed to date. I could read off her credentials, but that would be like spoiling the end of a masterfully crafted thriller. I want you all, if you're watching this on the Trill Black channel and if you're watching this on Melanin Intel, I want you to discover her for yourselves through her own voice, her own storytelling of her own story. Mrs. Jane Elliott, could you just say a little hello to the people before we properly begin?
Well, I didn't think you were talking about me. I was waiting to see who this fantastic person was that you were going to introduce the audience to. And I'm thinking, who could that be? And then it came to me that you're talking about me. That is not a proper description of me. But if that's what you want to say, I shall defend to the death your right to say it.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. um, I want us just to start. I want the people to discover you and your work through just us talking and just conversing. I've read up on you recently, and although I had heard of you years ago, I wasn't in the place spiritually and mentally to delve deeper into your impact on history. But when I had the time to look into you more recently, I couldn't believe what I was reading and discovering. It was all good news, ma'am. Don't worry. But anyway, I knew that I had to get in touch with you, even if it was a long shot, whether you'd respond or not. And I thank God that I did get in touch and that you did respond. Mrs. Elliott, let's start the story with this question. Where were you on April the 3rd, 1968, and what happened to you on that day?
I was teaching school, and I didn't know that anything bad had happened till I got home to my house and the telephone was ringing. And it was my sister. And she said, is your television on? I said, no. She said, you better turn it on. I said, why? She said, because they shot him. I said, who'd we shoot this time? She said, Martin Luther King Jr. And I can remember, and my whole body remembers how it felt when she said Martin Luther King Jr., because I couldn't believe that this country was so savage and so uncivilized and such a good Christian nation that we would kill a man for saying it's all right not to be white. I was just furious. I was beside myself with anger. The kids came home from school, and I fed them, I put them to bed, and the television was on, and I watched people like Walter Cronkite say things to 3 leaders of the black community. Walter Cronkite said, when our leader was killed, his widow held us together. Who's going to keep your people in line? And I thought, you miserable. And so I changed the channel. And there's some other fool saying to two so-called black men, don't you black people think you should feel sympathy for us white people because we can't feel the anger at this killing that you black people can? And I was absolutely beside myself with sorrow at what had happened and with anger and disappointment at what those supposedly bright, pale, stale males were saying. I was furious. I turned off the television. I got my husband's supper. He was working at the Oliver tractor plant at that time. He worked from 7 to 11. So he came in late, and I opened up the back door, and he put his arms around me, and I was crying. And he said, they killed him, didn't they? I said, yes, they did. And I'm going to do something about it, Daryl. He said, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to do what Hitler did. He said, Jane, what are you talking about? I said, I'm going to split my students according to the color of their eyes tomorrow. And I'm going to allow those who have the right color eyes to be on top the first day. And then I'm going to reverse it on Monday. He said, if you do that, you'll lose your job. I said, Daryl, if I don't do this, I'm not fit to be an educator. I am not going to let my students spend the rest of their lives thinking that the day Martin Luther King Jr. was killed was a good day in this country, because it isn't. It wasn't. It's not. It will never be. He said, well, you're going to be sorry. I said, I'm sorry right now because you don't understand what I'm talking about. Well, we went to bed, got up the next morning. I got ready for school. Kids were eating breakfast with their father. As I walked out the door, he said, are you going to do that thing you talked about yesterday? And I looked at him and I said, is Martin Luther King Jr. still dead? And I walked out the door as fast as I could because I didn't want him to see the tears in my eyes. I wanted to be supported in this, and he couldn't support me because he's a pale, stale male, and he has learned all his life that he's all right as long as he isn't black. And I was just furious. I got to school, and the teachers were just excited and delighted and elated over what had happened overnight. And the kids came in, and the first one in, Stephen Armstrong, said, they shot that king last night. I said, why'd they shoot that king? I said, we're going to talk about that, Stephen. So after we'd done the things you have to do in the morning, we started talking about that thing. And I asked them what they knew about black people, and they all knew every one of the negative stereotypes that I'd ever heard before. And these kids are 9 years old. And I finally said, you kids have any idea how it would feel to be something other than white in this country? No. Would you like to know? Yeah. I said, would you like to do something today that will help you to know that? Yeah. It was like, we're going to get out of writing and spelling and handwriting and math right now. Yeah. Let's do that. I said, all right. Today we're going to judge people by the color of their eyes. And since I'm blue-eyed, excuse me, I have to get a Kleenex. I'm sorry, but
That's okay.
anyway, I said today, since I'm blue-eyed, most of the students in this room are blue-eyed. Brown-eyed people are going to be on the top the first day. What do you mean? I said, I mean brown-eyed people are smarter than blue-eyed people. They're cleaner than blue-eyed people. They're they're civilized than blue-eyed people. And immediately, those little little pale-faced children pointed out the mistakes that blue-eyed people had made in that classroom yesterday and this morning and last week on the basis of eye color alone. It didn't take 10 minutes for them to know exactly how to treat somebody who was considered inferior. They became what I told them they were. And that was that was in 1968. And here we are in 2025, and we have allowed to be in the White House a person who is promoting the idea of the rightness of whiteness. We have taken drastic steps backward in this country in the last 55 years. And I'm just furious. I'm absolutely furious. This is supposed to be one of the most civilized nations on earth. There is nothing civilized about what we are teaching and what we are doing in schools and all over the country, not just in schools, but in everything else in this country right now. And anybody who argues with me about that, oh please don't. We're just in a mess right now because it's easier to go along to get along than it is to stand up and be counted and say you're wrong. And what we're doing is wrong. I learned more that day than I ever learned in a psychology class. I watched brown-eyed kids who were dyslexic read words they had never been able to read and spell words they had never been able to spell because I told them they were superior because of the color of their eyes. On the other hand, I had a little blue-eyed child that year who was the Lutheran, anyway, a minister's daughter. She had a steel-trapped mind. She was reading at the 6th grade level until the day she had the wrong color eyes. And on that day, she made mistakes in reading. She made mistakes in spelling. She stumbled when she crossed the classroom, and she came in from recess crying because of the way 2 of her brown-eyed peers had treated her on the playground. And I thought, oh my God, look what I've done. I have created a microcosm of society in a 3rd grade classroom. And these kids are living down to what they have been taught to do, to how they've been taught to behave by their teachers, by their parents, by their ministers, by their religion, by this society. My God, what have we done? And if I can do that in one day, in half an hour with 3rd graders, think what we can do if we do it to someone for a lifetime. If we start prenatally and keep it up post-mortem, because there are signs, there are places in cemeteries where people who are not so-called white aren't allowed to be buried. You know it, and I know it. And this is supposed to be a civilized nation. As long as we promote racism based on skin color, that's how long we will not be truly civilized. I sent those kids home that day. They were eager to go home. Usually they said, can't we could stay all night. We could sleep on the bed. We can sleep on the floor because we're having fun today. That day, they couldn't wait to go home. They went home and I came home to my house, and I had done that on Friday, and on Saturday morning, we got the results from people whose kids had told them what had gone on in the classroom, and who wouldn't speak to me, and who said ugly things as I walked by. It took less than 24 hours for people in that community to be angry about how anyone would dare to tell students that eye color is just as important as skin color, and neither one of them is what determines your intelligence. I went back into the classroom on Monday, and I knew I was going to have to reverse it. And I couldn't stand to think of what was going to happen, because I had heard my blue-eyed boys in the boys' room say what they were going to do to the brownies, as they called them, when the blue eyes got on top. I hated to go in the classroom that day. I went into the classroom, we reversed the exercise. I waited for those kids to get even. They didn't get even. At the end of the day, they were glad to go home, and they hoped this wouldn't happen again. I said, don't worry about it. It's not going to happen again. The next day, before we did anything else, I had them write 4-paragraph compositions telling who Martin Luther King Jr. was, how the child felt on Friday, how the child felt on Monday, and what discrimination is. After they had gotten done writing, we got in a magic circle, and anything you say in the magic circle will be dealt with in the magic circle. And I said to those kids, you blue-eyed boys said you were going to get even with the brownies when you got on top. None of you got even. Why didn't you get even? And that year and every year after that, those kids said almost in a chorus, because we found out how it feels to be on the bottom, and we didn't want to make anybody feel as bad as we felt when we were on the bottom. Now, if we could educate a bunch of pale, stale males and females to what it feels like to be on the bottom, we could change this thing. We could turn this racist nonsense around. And if we could convince people that the word race, to mean a separate group of people, came out of France in 1580, that short a time this has been going on. And if we could convince them that it started with a vicar in the Catholic Church in Spain during the Spanish Inquisition, when this man who had a lot of power decided he was going to convert all Christians to Catholicism, and those who weren't Christians were going to die. He had killed 2,000 people in horrible, horrible ways before somebody made him aware that many of the people he had killed were Christians. And then he realized you can't tell what a person's religion is by looking at them. So he decided he would have to find a way to decide who deserved to live and who deserved to die. So he called the lighter brown people white, because white is the color of purity and goodness. He called the darker brown people black, because black is the color of savagery and evil. And he set us at polar opposites in the late 1400s, early 1500s, and we're still living according to that lie today. If you are good and pure and white, that means you have the right to destroy those who are savage and evil. And that means anybody who has a dark skin. Now, evidently, that fool didn't know that we're all shades of brown. We were then, and we are now, because we all started in a country on the continent of Africa, where you're exposed to a lot of sunlight, so you have to have your body has to produce a lot of melanin in order to protect your cells from the damaging rays of the sun. That's all skin color does for you. It doesn't indicate your intelligence. It doesn't indicate your worth as a human being. But if you have religion to prove to you and the rest of the world that you are perfect or imperfect because of what the priest or the preacher says, then you can go home and look upon yourself as less than or as more than just because of the color of your skin. This is so absolutely ridiculous. And so it's a criminal. It's criminal. It's not just sinful, it's a crime. To treat people positively or negatively on the basis of your ignorance about skin color is absolutely ridiculous, and it has to be stopped. Now, do you still want to hear any more from me?
Indeed, that most certainly I do. Most certainly. I want to ask you then. You said a lot there, and you were just dropping gems constantly, and I don't really know where to pick up from there. But I will make an attempt and ask you this. You mentioned, before I forget, do you remember the name of the individual who started this in Spain, as you said, so I can look him up later?
Torquemada. His name was Torquemada. I'm probably pronouncing this wrong, but it's spelled Torquemada. Look up Torquemada, and you will just be sick to your stomach when you realize that. And if you read of how he killed people, the ways in which he killed people was totally inhumane. But people went along because he had the power, because he was a vicar in the Catholic Church. And today, right now, today, 55 years later, I have been banned on all college and university campuses because
Wow.
the evangelical quote Christians don't want me to say what I say to college students. Now think about that.
So you told me that, and
How
I
frightened
thought.
must they?
Sorry, go ahead.
How frightened must those people be if they're afraid to have one old woman come in and say to 200 to 500 students at a time, look, people, none of you are white, and none of you are black, and none of you are yellow, and none of you are red. You are all shades of brown. And my daughter is having sweatshirts printed on which it says, I'm an SOB and so are you. And people are going to say, oh, that's a terrible thing. And I'm going to say, read what it says underneath it, where it says shades of brown. Because that's what we all are. We are all shades of brown. We are not black and white. Human beings do not come in those two colors. We come in shades of brown because we all came out of Africa. our ancient ancestors, 340,000 years ago, came out of a country in Africa. And they were very dark brown because they were exposed to a lot of sunlight and their bodies produce a lot of melanin. That's the only reason for skin color. And the only reason my skin is lighter than yours is because my ancient ancestors moved from the equator and moved north. And so they were exposed to less and less sunlight the farther north they went. So now when our thief executive says, why can't we get people to come here from Norway and Sweden and Denmark? He's saying we need people with lighter skin. And anybody who hears that says to themselves, what? He's a leader of the whole nation? No, he's no leader at all. Because if that's the way you believe and that's the way you speak and that's the way you lead, you're leading in the wrong direction. Anyway,
Yes.
I probably, if you ever use, we won't have any listeners after this. I'm sorry, but hey, nobody
believe me.
to hear the truth. We all want to hear the myth. I'm tired of the myth. It was a lie. It's got to be stopped.
But even the people who will wince at this, which I shouldn't have a lot in my audience, but even the people that will wince at this, somewhere in the bottom of their heart, they know that what you're saying is true. They know that what you're saying is true. I want to ask you, ma'am, so I take it then, when you did this test and you showed the children that, blue eyes and brown eyes, it's all arbitrary. It all depends on how a society decides to treat each other with different people within its own society. After you did this test and you observed how people who obviously were intelligent, just off the back of being told they were nothing and worthless, all of a sudden their intelligence just vanished. And people who thought they weren't intelligent, when they were told obviously that they have blue eyes or brown eyes and they're innately better, their self-esteem went up and shot up, and along with that, intelligence. Now, I take it then, from observing something like that, you are not a fan of the bell curve. I don't know if you've heard of that.
Of what?
The bell curve. It's a theory about intelligence.
I remember the bell curve. We stopped studying the bell curve a long time ago. The bell curve. I know about the bell curve. And I know that the bell curve depends on your willingness to agree with a lie. I watched little brown-eyed boys, a couple little brown-eyed boys who couldn't read. They were reading at the first grade level until the day they were on the top. They were suddenly reading at the third grade level. One of those little boys came up to my desk at the end of the day and said, Mrs. Elliott, can I have my spelling paper? I said, what do you want to do with it? He said, I want to take it home and show it to my mother. She thinks I can't spell, and I can. And he started to cry, and so did I. Because I thought, oh my God, this kid has been in kindergarten, first grade, pre-second, second, and this is his 5th year in school, and he still thinks he can't read and he can't spell because the people who were paid to teach him to read and spell didn't know how to do it. So he's convinced there's something wrong with him instead of his teachers realizing that there was something wrong with how they were teaching him. You can take that child became a successful human being because at the 3rd grade level, he found out that he could read and that somebody had lied to him. I know.
Because people are still using the bell curve even till today. They're using the bell curve and they're saying, believe it or not, they're using it to say that there are clearly differences in intelligence and between the races. So I ask it because it's still irrelevant.
You have to say to them, you have to say to them when they start, according to who? Who has told you this nonsense? If you can take the second time you did the following year, I did the exercise with 16 little kids. The principal gave me stopped me in the hall before school started, showed me my class roll and said, these kids are never going to learn anything. Pass them on and get them out here. They'll never amount to anything anyway. The other teachers haven't been able to teach them to read, and neither can you. And I thought, so I went to the office and I looked at their cumulative files. Every one of those kids had high math scores and low reading and spelling scores. And I started to laugh because I thought, I'm going to teach these kids to read. They're going to be reading at or above the fourth grade level before they leave this classroom because I know how to teach kids to read. And I'm laughing when I came out of the office, and the secretary said, Jane, what's so funny? I said, what's so funny is the principal just gave me something that's going to make me look like the best teacher in the world. She said, what did he do? I said, he gave me a class of kids that can't read. At the end of the year, these kids are going to be able to read. One of those kids who weren't supposed to finish high school, one became a teacher, one became a lawyer, and the rest of them, except for one who was killed in an alcohol-related accident before 2 weeks before graduation. But every one of them, rest of them, finished high school, and some of them went on to either a junior college, or more than that, to become a lawyer. So they had been lied to by the time I got them. Some of them, this was their fifth year of being lied to because they've repeated a couple of grades. All of a sudden, they got in my classroom, and not because I'm master teacher, no, because I know how to teach the dyslexic child. And in Riceville at that time, 20 to 30% of our students were dyslexic because because their fathers are. This is something that's handed down through the male line, and if you recognize it and you know how to teach to it, then those kids can be successful far beyond any success that their parents have known.
Hmm. What was Thank you, Jane. What was the Well, let me ask you this actually before I ask that. How did news get out about your blue eye test? And yeah, just how did news get out? Because that's what um made you a uh, made you household name. Let's see if we can get this
I
back.
became a dirty word at the household name. People were furious. I showed the letters. I showed my mother the letters, like the kid things that my kids wrote describing who Martin Luther King Jr. was, how they fell on Friday, how they fell on Monday, and I showed them to her, and she showed them to the editor of the local paper. And then he printed something about it in the local paper. The kids were just delighted because they were in the paper. I said, yeah, this is nice for you, but it's going to be interesting. And it was interesting. It was every year. I taught there for many years after that, and every year, at least half the parents would call the principal whose kids were in third grade and say, "Don't put my kid in that N-word lover's classroom." And the principal never had to say, "Which N-word lover do you mean?" Because we all knew there was only one, and I was it. And I finally reached the point where I'd say, "Yes, I'm an N-word lover. Better to be a lover than a hater any day. Loving won't kill me. Hating will destroy you from within." And it made life very interesting for me and for my kids. And finally, a couple of years after that, the principal's wife, who taught at the high school level, stopped me in the hall and said, Jane, you've got to get your kids out of this school. I said, why would I do that? Because these teachers are trying to destroy your children and they're having fun doing it. Get your kids out of here. So I called my husband and said, find us a house in Osage. We're moving. And he worked in a supermarket in Osage. So he hired a realtor to find us a house. And he called the realtor called me one day and said, I found some houses for you to look at. I said, fine, I'll come in and look at them. So I went and looked at them, and they were the most rundown, disgusting, despicable things you would ever live in. And I said, Hi, are these the best houses you have to sell in Osage, Iowa? He said, they're best I've got for you. And that said it all. So then he called me a day later and said, I found a house for you. I said, oh, where is it? He said, it's 6 miles east of town. And I thought, well, that'll keep me out of people's hair. I'm 6 miles away. They don't have to claim me. So it's an old schoolhouse, just right for me, right? So I came out and looked at this old schoolhouse, and it's fantastic. It is just perfect for a family of 6 people. And I called my husband and said, I'm buying this schoolhouse. He says, Jane, you didn't. I said, no, but I'm going to. Come out and you can see it. And we'll buy it together. But we're buying this schoolhouse. And he came out, he walked in, he looked at it, he said, I could live here. I said, if you want to live with me, you will live here because I'm going to live in this place. And we turned it into a beautiful, lovely, small, just perfect house for 6 people. And we have lived here ever since. Except he died 12 years ago.
God bless him. God bless him. What was the reaction across the country to the blue eye test? So you talking about your community. Where exactly were you? Which state were you in America?
I was in a state of hysteria in Iowa because
Nice.
you can't be in a state of it's just ridiculous. People would see me coming toward them on the street and would cross the street so they wouldn't have
Wow.
to meet me and speak to me or have me speak back to them. And they didn't want people to be seen. They didn't want people to see them visiting with me. So I became, the typhoid Mary. And I was born and raised in Riceville, Iowa. But I kicked the crucifix when I said, this business of treating people positively or negatively on the basis of your ignorance about skin color has to be stopped. I'm an educator. The word educator comes from the root duc dus, which means lead, the prefix e, which means out, the suffix ate, which means the act of, and the suffix or, which means one who does. An educator is one who is engaged in the act of leading people out of ignorance. And the number one ignorance in the United States of America is the ignorance of thinking there's more than one race and more than one color group. It's a flat out lie. And it's time to put a stop to it.
It's amazing that you speak this strongly in 2025 and sharply as well, if you don't mind me adding. I hope that doesn't sound patronizing, but you're still sharp and you're still, as I've watched clip after clip of you on YouTube over the years, and you're still as sharp and as angry about this as you were back 10, 20, 30 years ago. That's important to me because people like to make out as though this is a bygone issue. This is something that we've overcome in the UK, where I am, and certainly in the United States of America. What's your opinion about that?
Oh, when Barack Obama got elected, I thought, just like Whoopi Goldberg did. Whoopi Goldberg said, I can put my suitcase down now. I don't have to leave this country. And I
Mhm.
thought, people are getting smart. They elected Barack Obama. And then they reelected Barack Obama. And I didn't realize that those racists were going to go underground and only feed their anger as long as he was president of the United States. They fed their anger to the point that they would be so stupid as to put in the White House Adenosaurus T. Rump. If it hadn't been for Barack Obama, we would never have had a T. Rump. Make no mistake about this, because this man has no business leading this country, and he has proven that. But he has a friend in South Africa, Mr. Lone Scum. Now, I know that isn't his name, but I taught dyslexic children for years, and dyslexic children move the letters around in words. So Elon Musk becomes Lone Scum if you taught dyslexic people long enough. And I'm sure Mr. What's his name wouldn't like to be called Lone Scum, but that's the way he's acting. I'm absolutely furious that right now we have in the White House, and I remember when Richard Nixon said during his term, I'm trying to save you the White House for you white people. He was president of the United States when he said that. I'm trying to save the White House for you white people. And ever since I heard that, I've been absolutely determined to get the name of the White House changed to the President's Residence, because that's what it is. And that's what we should call it instead of calling it the White House. Because the White House is exactly the wrong name. Yes, the building is painted white, but people get the idea that that house is only for white folks. That means we can't ever have a president, because there are no white people in the United States of America nor anywhere else on the face of the earth. Human beings do not come in black and white or red and yellow. They come in shades of brown. So if until we change the name of the White House, I'm going to stay alive just out of meanness. And if you want me to die, change the name of the White House to the President's Residence. And then I'll say, thank you, Lord, and now I'm ready to go.
I think there was a prophet in the Bible who didn't die before he saw the Messiah. So yeah, that would be a modern day version of that.
Well,
What?
in the Bible it says Jesus had kinky woolly hair and feet of bronze. So we white folks, so-called white folks, one of the main differences between people who call themselves white and those people of colors. White people come into a new environment, they immediately adjust the environment to fit their needs. They will destroy the land, the water, the air in order to make money out of what's there. And they will steal what's there and turn it into something that will make them wealthy. People of color, on the other hand, when they come into a new environment, adjust their needs to fit the environment. It's a tremendously important difference. So that when you have people who come into an environment and see people who are of a different color, you have to go back to what we learned 425 years ago and say, well, they're less human than we are because they aren't as bright as we are, they aren't as white as we are, they aren't as spiritual as we are. And we turn Jesus Christ into a man who has long, fairly straight hair and pale skin, because we white folks don't want to kneel and pray to somebody who looks like you.
I want to show you something. I'll present this to the screen and then you can see it. This is an image that you can see on your screen, Jane. It's of an image
Mm-hmm.
of a young Jesus by the Russian Orthodox Church. I think it dates back to the medieval era. Now, this is Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Let me show you Jesus as he's portrayed popularly today. This is what you were talking about. Yeah, like this.
Because he looks blue-eyed and pale skin, and they can relate to that. And that's what pale faces can relate to, is somebody who looks like them. The most famous picture of Jesus was done by somebody not too many years ago, painted it, and he's kneeling, doing this, and looking upward to the heavens. And anybody with an ounce of brains knows that heaven isn't up there. It's right here. It's in a different dimension right here. You see, I don't believe in death. I believe that your mind is pure energy. Energy can neither be created nor destroyed. Your mind, the energy that is your mind, was there before you were born, and it will be there after you're gone. As far as I'm concerned, there's no doubt about that. I think Jesus knew that, right, and all he had to do was turn the corner, and he's in a different dimension. And here, let me show you something. This will make you, if there are any visitors, any viewers left, this will send them away. This is a picture that was taken of one of my third or fourth cousins while we were having a little meeting here. And this man was sitting on a chair, on a stool, and I was in the kitchen working. And you see this thing behind him?
Hmm.
You see that?
Yes,
Does that look
yes.
like a face to you? Well,
It
and
looks
down
like
below
somebody. It
him,
looks like somebody going past him. Yeah.
right, right. And here's her dress. She's wearing a frilly blue long dress. This woman is. Now I know she's there. She has been in the church next to our house for many, many years. And I knew she was there. So a friend of mine said, get your divining rods. And I started to laugh. I said, I don't have divining rods. He said, make yourself a pair. So I did. He said, take it over there and hold them out in front of you. And when they cross, she's there. I said, okay, I'll do that. So I did that. And I went over and I asked her if I could find out what her name was. And they crossed. And I said, fine. And does your first name begin with A? No. B? No. C? Yes. I got her name, which is Catherine Markham. And we had a reunion for, little old people who had been in that church many years ago one day. And this little old lady is sitting there, 85 years old. And I said, did you know a woman named Catherine Markham? She said, well, yes, I did. I said, where did she live? She said, she lived right down the road. I said, how do you remember her? She said, because on Halloween, when she didn't have any candy left, she gave us dimes. And I took her by the elbow and I said, come with me. And I took her over to the corner. And Catherine Markham and this woman and I had a conversation about what has happened lately and how long Catherine Markham has been there. Now, you can say Jane Elliott is crazy. I'm perfectly happy to have people say I'm crazy. But several bikers, big belligerent bikers, came here who had gone to school in this church many years ago, and in this school many years ago. And I said, would you like to see the cemetery? Well, yeah. I said, well, come on, we'll go out to the cemetery. So I took my divining rods And I walked across the cemetery, and every time I came to a grave, the slings crossed. And then when I got past the grave, they uncrossed. And these guys were behind me, these big, tall, tough bikers. And I heard one of them said, "Something's following her." "Well, yeah, it is. Look at there. Something's following her." "Well, yeah, there's something following me because I don't believe in death. And the spirit of the people in those graves is still there. And that followed me across all those graves. It was just fascinating. It's absolutely amazing. It's not amusing, it's amazing. My daughter used to sleep in the upstairs bedroom facing the church, and she'd come down just furious. And I'd say, "Well, Sarah, what's going on?" She said, "Will you please tell those people in the church to stop waving at me?" I said, "Well, what do you do when they wave at you?" She said, "I do this." I said, "Sarah, don't give them the finger. You might want to go over there someday after dark. You might want to be over there and be happy and pleasant and comfortable." She said, "I don't have to put up with this." I said, "Well, don't give them the finger anymore." So I went over and asked him, please, to forgive her for giving them the finger. Then my grandson came home from the Marines, 4 years in the Marines, and this over 6 foot man was going to stay at the church because he was going to go to college, get back into college, finish his college, on the GI Bill. And I said, "Move into the church. You're perfectly welcome." He was there 2 days and 3 nights, and he came over after the third night. He was just furious. He said, "I'm not going to put up with that anymore. I'm going to find a decent place to live." I said, "Zach, what's the matter?" "It doesn't matter. I'm not going to put up with that." I come to find out, he told my daughter later that when he was watching television, something kept doing this to him, and he couldn't stop it because he couldn't get up. And when he came down the three steps leading up to this upstairs, there's a landing up 3 steps up, and then you go upstairs. And when he got to the landing, something pushed him down the last 3 steps. And he said, "If I hadn't hit my hand on the refrigerator, I'd have broken my neck." He said, "Somebody pushed me, and I'm not going into that building anymore." But you see, I think he was either watching the sexy shows on the television or smoking pot. That church is a sacred place to the people whose spirits are in there. And they don't appreciate people misbehaving in that building. And they know how to put a stop to it. Now, anybody who's hearing what I'm saying right now has turned off whatever they're using because they do not want to admit that that could possibly happen.
Well, I don't. I think you're underestimating yourself. I think people will be very, very intrigued by what you're saying. You just mentioned your son and your daughter, your family. I wanted to ask you, Jane, what did your family think after this all?
Oh,
Your blue eye test made you famous. What was their reaction?
my 4 kids took more abuse than any student should have to take from students, from their peers and their teachers and the parents of their peers. Nobody should have to put up with that. My 4 kids know exactly how it feels to be treated unfairly on the basis of somebody else's ignorance about skin color. After 3 years after I started doing the exercise, the principal's wife stopped me in the hall one day and said, "Jane, you've got to get your kids out of this school." I said, "Why?" "These teachers are trying to destroy your children and they're having fun with it. Get them out of here." So I got them out. I moved them to Osage, and I moved into an old schoolhouse here within the Osage Community School District. And the kids moved out. And one day, the 4 of them were sitting around this table, and they were kids in high school and junior high at that time. And they were talking about what had happened, the things that had happened to them and been done to them while they were in Riceville. And I said, "Why didn't you kids tell me about those things? You never told me." And Brian said, "We talked about it. We decided you were in enough trouble as it was. We'd handle it ourselves." And they did. And I got them out. I was lucky that I could get them out. But children who are called black in schools all over the United States of America have to stay in those schools where in many cases they are treated as less than, and where the history books treat them as though they are less than, and where they have changed the map of the world so that the Christian countries take up over 2/3 of the map and the other countries of the world take up the other third. On the Mercator map, when you look at the Mercator map of the world, the equator is 2/3 of the way down the map. And Greenland, according to that map, is bigger than South America. But then if you read the legend at the bottom of the map, it says South America is actually 9 times larger than Greenland. But on the map, It shows Greenland larger than South America because the Mercator was commissioned by the Pope to make a map that showed the spread of Christianity. So for all these years, we have been using a map that shows the spread of Christianity and has nothing to do with honesty about the size, shape, location, and importance of the land masses on the earth. Now, do you really think that many teachers read that legend where it says South America is actually 9 times larger than Greenland? If they did, they would stop using that map. You know it, and I know it. And I had to speak to a group in Australia one day, and there was this, and I was showing them the map, and this one woman was quite irate. She said, "What are you talking about? That's not." I said, "Get up here." So she got up on the stage. I said, "Now read that sentence right there." Pointed to the legend, and she read it. She said, and she turned to the audience. She said, "It says South America is actually 9 times larger than Greenland." And all the people in the audience gasped with amazement and horror because nobody pointed that out to them before. Do you think somebody should point that out to the people who are making maps and selling them in these schools? It's just but if you see the map, I've got 100 of them here someplace. But if you haven't seen the Peters projection map, you need to see it because it's a whole new way of looking at the world and closer to telling the truth. Where I could go in the other room and get one, but look up Peters projection map, find one, and put it on your wall behind you. Instead of those books, put that map up there and see how people react to seeing the map of the world as it really is, instead of seeing it as white people want it to be.
Oh my goodness. I've
See,
you said you've left me speechless.
Hey, shut up, Jane.
No. I was saying it's the lag in the feed, but I was just saying you've left me speechless. That's all. You've left me completely. So I don't even know where to carry on from here.
Well, I don't want you to be speechless, but what I want you to know is we send kids to school from 4 now and 3. We get them in preschool and we get them in school from the time they're 4 until the time they're 18. And instead of educating them, we teach them things that aren't true, but it helps us to later on teach them a history that isn't right. We've got to stop calling history because it sounds like his story. We've got to either change it to her story or our story. Now, I know that that's not the meaning of history, but to kids from 3rd grade to 12th grade, the word history sounds like his story. And we tell history as if the only people who did anything important were males. And we just try to avoid the fact that without females, there would be no males. There's three things I tell college students, and this 3 of the reasons people don't want me on college campuses, these evangelicals. Number 1, without what we call blacks, there would be no what we call whites. Because modern human beings evolved in sub-Saharan Africa, and their skins were very dark brown. And the only reason I have this color skin is because my ancestors moved farther from the equator, and my skin faded because I wasn't exposed to as much sunlight. Number 2, if it weren't for Jews, there would be no Christians. Jesus was an Ethiopian Jew. Wow. Christianity was born out of Judaism. It's time for us to stop killing people on the basis of our ignorance about religion, because what we're doing is breaking every law in the Bible with the way we treat people of the Jewish faith. Without them, there would be no us. And number 3, without women, there would be no men. You can put 2 female mammal cells, eggs, together in a petri dish, break down the cell wall, combine those 2 eggs, and come up with another female mammal. You can't do that with sperm cells. If you mix up a bunch of sperm cells in a petri dish, all you get are mixed up sperm. You can't come up with another person, but we could have an all-female society if we chose to. I wouldn't want that. I like men. Boy, do I like men.
Thank you.
We won't go into that. However, without men, there would be no me. without my father and mother doing what made them happy, there would be no me. And without Daryl and me, there would be no Sarah, Brian, Mary, or Mark, nor any of those 8 grandchildren and 6 great-grandchildren. It took the 2 of us. And it was good fun. Sorry, but I enjoyed every minute of it. However,
we'll keep that part till after the show, maybe.
You take that out. I take that out. I realize old people aren't supposed to enjoy anything that has anything to do with sex. Well, I'm sorry, but none of you would be here if it weren't for sex.
Of course,
you got it?
Of course.
Thank you.
I've seen
Right
Jane.
along.
I've seen clips of you making white schoolgirls cry. Why, Jane? Why? Well, why are you doing this to poor little, I don't know, Sarah? In fact, let me play you the clip I'm talking about. Tell me if you remember this interaction, what you remember of it, and if you remember whatever happened to the young lady in the clip.
Perception is everything. White people look vicious and ugly and non-caring and cruel and arrogant and powerful and condescending and angry. Are you angry?
No.
Oh, good for you. Are you angry?
Trying not to.
Trying not to be. Now, does that take a lot of energy?
Yes.
Yes. Are you holding it in?
Yes.
Yes. And are you trying really, really hard not to react to me?
Yes.
Yes. And are you trying really hard not to look at me?
At the moment, yes.
Yes. Why?
Because I don't want to make myself more upset.
You don't want to make yourself more upset by looking at me.
Yes.
Right. Does that take a lot of time, a lot of energy?
Yes.
Yes. Is that hard for you?
Yes.
Could you develop an ulcer over this?
No.
If you had to do it every day, what would happen to your blood pressure?
It would rise.
Yeah. If somebody stood over you and you knew it was going to happen every day? Or you expected it to happen every day? Or it happened when you didn't expect it to? Or it happened to your kids every day? After it happened to your mother every day? Now, getting right along. Your hand is still up. You still didn't learn anything, did you? Didn't I just say when your hand is up, you are thinking of what you're going to say instead of what's being said? Didn't I just say that?
Yes, you did.
And did you hear that?
Yes, I did.
And did you decide that you were just going to do it your way?
I was.
Wait a minute, you were on a roll
yes,
there for
I
a minute.
did.
Thank you very
yes,
much.
Yes, I did.
Now, since you choose to not listen to others, what do you suppose we're going to do where you're concerned?
No, listen to me.
Thank you very much.
May I finish what I was saying,
no,
please?
because you're still thinking of what you're going to say instead of what I'm saying. Now, getting right along.
I heard what you were saying.
You're doing it again.
What you were
you're
saying.
doing it again.
I don't care.
You're doing it again.
It's wrong.
You're doing it again.
Persecuted her for standing out.
You're doing it again.
Persecuted him for standing out. The only change that ever happens is when people stand out, and I have to stand back.
Martin Luther King Jr. was shot. Are you in any physical danger here? Are you in any physical danger here? Is that girl in any physical danger here? Emmett Till was hanged by his neck after he was beaten almost to death, simply because he made a statement to a white woman. Every time I do the exercise, there is a point at which I know I have made the point. And we could stop there, but you have to nail it down. And so it goes on longer than some people think it should, but you have to nail it down. People at this institution...
You've made your point, you're right.
Yeah, thank you very much. What is my point that I've made?
That you can't make generalizations about any place because there's racism everywhere.
That's right. And while it may be... No. You don't come back in here until you've apologized to every person in this room. Because you just exercised a freedom that none of these people of color have. When these people of color get tired of racism, they can't just walk out because there's no place in this country where they aren't going to be exposed to racism. They can't even stay in their own homes and not be exposed to racism if they turn on the television. But you, as a white female, when you get tired of being judged and treated unfairly on the basis of your eye color, you can walk out that door, and you know it won't happen out there. You exercised a freedom they don't have. If you're going to be in here, you're going to apologize to every black person in this room. And do it now.
I'm
And the
sorry.
Latinos, every person of color.
Racism, this country.
Bullshit! No, you're not going to say, I'm sorry there's racism. You're going to apologize for what you just did.
I will not apologize because it is
Out.
not a matter of
Out.
race always.
Out. Out. Now, is she choosing to leave? Yes. Yes. She could apologize and stay.
I won't play the wrong game anymore.
It ain't gonna hurt her. It's not gonna hurt her to apologize.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
What's going on in this room alone? Once she leaves it, that's it. It's over with.
Okay? That ain't gonna hurt her. Is it gonna hurt her?
She, according to her action, it's killing her.
Yes.
I'm gonna leave my thoughts to one side. Now I wanted to ask Jay, why would you do this to this poor girl?
Okay, if you think that that's horrible to do to one student who's getting college credit for going through that exercise for a day and it isn't costing her a dime, and she is going to be in better shape educationally and socially because of it. We do things worse than that to children of color from the moment they're born until the day they die. And anyone who thinks that's too tough for that poor little white woman needs to realize that people who look like you go through that from birth to death. When I go onto a schoolyard and some teacher says, and here's one of my little black boys, I say, you ought to lose your job for that. What do you mean? Because that child isn't black. Black means savage and evil. That kid isn't savage and evil, but if you keep on calling him black, you can make it possible for your penal institutions to be full every year. There'll always be a job for white people who are going to oversee black people as long as people like you call children black and white. Those two words do not apply to human skin color. There are no black people and there are no white people. And anybody who's teaching ought to know that. And if they don't know that, they shouldn't be in education because they are miseducating the American mind. And it's time to put a stop to it. Now, I know people get tired of hearing me say it's time to put a stop to it. But I seriously think that that young woman changed at least a part of her behaviors as a result of being treated the way she has allowed other people to be treated and has gone along. The first time I did that exercise, I went down to the teacher's lounge at noon because so many horrible things were happening in my classroom. The brown-eyed kids were on top, and they were acting white, and the blue-eyed kids were on the bottom. They were acting black, quite frankly, and that's what was going on. I walked into the teacher's lounge, and they were all just abuzz because of what had happened to Martin Luther. I said, I told them what was happening in my classroom. There were about 8 teachers in there on break, and one of them said, I don't know how you have time for all that extra stuff. It's all I can do to teach reading, writing, and arithmetic. Well, I knew how she taught. She hadn't taught reading, writing, and arithmetic yet. She might as well have done the extra stuff. The other one said, and she was over 60 years old and had been molding young minds in that area for many years. She looked up at me and she said, I don't know why you're doing that. I thought it was about time somebody shot that son of a bitch. She was a teacher in that school. And did the rest of the teachers say, oh, you shouldn't say a thing like that? Oh, no, no, no. They either laughed and smiled or smiled and nodded. And I was absolutely furious. If I had thought at noon when I went down to the teacher's lounge that this was too hard for my kids, I was going to stop it after lunch. And after I heard how those teachers reacted to what I was telling them, I decided that I wasn't going to stop it at noon. And on Monday, I was going to reverse it because no student is ever going to leave my presence thinking that it's all right to refer to people as black or white or son of a bitch because of the color of their skin. Because it isn't the color of their skin that's the problem. The problem is people who think that skin color is an indicator of intelligence or lack of intelligence. It's a lie. I know I've said that several times, but it hasn't been said often enough. It hasn't. We could empty the churches tomorrow if every minister would get up, every priest, every minister, every whoever is leading the group would stand up and say, folks, there are no white or black people on the face of the earth. We're all shades of brown. Every church would be emptied because we white folks don't want to give that up. And black folks don't want to give that up because it's taken them all these years to get any proof of intelligence whatsoever. They don't want to give up the word black. They'd better give up the word black because it is a lie. I can see where your beard stops and your skin begins. Your skin is not black. Your skin is brown, and you know it, and I know it. And my hair is sort of white, but my skin is not. I refuse to go along with something that's wrong any longer. It's time for all of us to realize that we've been had. And we've only been doing this for 400 and some.
You might get me to change the name of my channel from Trill Black to Trill Brown. I might have to start reconsidering the name of my channel.
Good idea. Do you realize what a difference that would make in your audience numbers? They would say, good Lord, if he can do it, maybe the rest of us can. But because you aren't black, you have been assigned that color because because if we can perpetuate racism, we can continue to make money off it. Racism is an extremely profitable venture, and we make a whole lot of money with racism. We have been doing it for 400 years. It's time to put a stop to it. It is so interesting for me to watch the people who read the news now. When I was 35, all the news was read by pale, stale males. All of a sudden, we've got a whole bunch of young women, some brown, some dark brown, some light brown. None of them are white, and none of them are yellow, and none of them are red. They are all shades of brown. And I sit and watch that and think, too bad, folks. We no longer have black and white television. Now we have color television. And you can see what people really look like instead of just thinking, well, some of us are gray and some of us are white and some of us are black. Color television could have turned this thing around, because I can see what color you are and you can see what color I am. And neither of us is black or white.
Is this why you say, I've heard you say that, make this statement, and it might sound shocking to some, and you've kind of touched on it, but is this why you say all white people are racist? What do you mean by that statement? Because I've heard you say it before.
If you are white and you aren't a racist, you didn't learn the lesson. If you don't believe in the rightness of whiteness, you haven't been listening. If you believe, if you realize, look at the National Geographic magazine for April of 2018. And there's a map in there that shows when we got to this continent and how many years it's been. Thousands of years that people of color came to this continent. But we say that Columbus discovered America. We deliberately wipe out all the years before 1492, because if we told the truth, we would have to say that if it weren't for those people from Africa, there wouldn't be any people in what we call America. And we've got to stop calling this country America. America is everything from the northernmost point of Canada to the southernmost point of South America. All the citizens in all those countries are Americans. But we, in the 48 contiguous states, Alaska, Hawaii, and the islands off the southeastern coast of the United States, we are citizens of the United States of America. And the most important word in that title is the word united. And right now, we have a thief executive who is trying to divide us. And he's being successful at it. We have to realize that we, in those 48 states in Alaska, Hawaii, are citizens of the United States of America, and we must refuse to be constantly have this country called America. This is the United States of America, and I want people, and if you don't want to say all those syllables, then say U.S., because U.S., those two letters together spell the word us, and that's what we are. We are Usians. We aren't Americans. We are Usians, if you want to do it that way. But let's start being realistic about this instead of going back to 1492, because we didn't go any farther back. We didn't go back to when this country was really found, when it was discovered by people from Africa. We started and we decided it was discovered in 1492. Well, there were people here when Columbus got here, and they were brown. They weren't red, they were brown. And so was Columbus, but he didn't know it.
Wow, this is incredible what you've just said, because this Trill Black started as an endeavor, a historical endeavor. I wanted to look into what people called sub-Saharan African history, but I quickly realized that what we call Black history, brown history, let's say, what we call Black history on the continent of Africa wasn't actually limited to sub-Sahara. So when I discovered that
Mhm.
Black and brown history actually isn't limited to sub-Sahara Africa, I started to do more research, and I thought, oh my goodness, there's Egypt, there's Nubia, there's the Moors, and so
That's
I had to start the channel. Now
have,
I can't explain to you the amount of hate I've got and the channel has got since it started, just propagating the fact that the ancient Egyptians were black and the Nubians were black and the Moors were black. The hate has been something I've never seen before. Why is this, Jane? Why does this happen?
because when white people come into a new environment, they adjust the environment to fit their needs. And in order to make themselves feel good, they have to make somebody feel bad. And if you can point to a difference that is very obvious, then you treat people on the basis of their differences instead of their likenesses. You and I are more alike than we are different. You know that, and I know that. We have most of the same. We have most of the same organs. We depend on each one of those organs. Right now, we have people. I may have said this to you already. We have people who are fighting DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. But the most beautiful example of diversity is the human body. Think of it. Do you see with your feet? Do you chew with your ears? Do you hear with your knees? Every part of your body is made for a specific reason, and it is valued because of what it can do to keep you alive. And you have to take care of every one of those parts if you want that body to continue to live. This society and this world of human beings, is like the human body. Without diversity, we will be gone. Without your brain, you don't know where to put your feet. Without your nose, you'll have trouble breathing. Without your eyes, you can't, it's very, very difficult to get through the day without being able to see. If people would just realize that over 4,000 cells in our bodies, each one of them is designed for a different purpose and does a different thing. And I don't know if you've ever dressed a chicken, but people who really talk about the color of skin need to dress a chicken sometime and see how colorful our insides are. It is just amazing. And that would be an extremely educational thing for a teacher to go into a classroom and say, boys and girls, I'm going to show you something about the human body. I'm going to show you diversity. And I do with a chicken because you can't dress a child. You can't, dress a child, but you could dress a chicken in front of your students and say, see how these wings are made, see how these feet are made, see how this neck is made, see how this bill is made. All those things are like that because of how that chicken lives and what that chicken has to have in order to live. Human beings are like that. The human body is the most diverse thing you can study, in my estimation. And if we start referring to diversity as being like the human body, every part of it is necessary. Every part of it, the human body is necessary. They're all different colors, different shapes, different sizes, and different uses. And they all have to be included, and they all have to be treated fairly. Does that make sense to you?
Perfect sense. Perfect sense. There's a theory you
Well,
mentioned.
see, we could stop calling diversity a bad thing. Mr. T. Rump, and that, shut up, Jane. Our so-called president is going to do away with all diversity training because he doesn't know what it's about. He thinks it's about different colored people. No, it's about the fact that every human being in this country has the right to be expected to be treated equitably and to be included. It's about equity and inclusion because we value diversity. There are people who are good scientists, and there are people who are good nurses, and there are people who are good people for cleaning up the mess the scientists make, because we have diverse talents, diverse abilities, diverse intelligences, and it's time for us to recognize and appreciate all that diversity. Can you imagine this country with nothing but white males walking around? I'll tell you what would happen. Pretty soon there'd be nobody. White males can't reproduce asexually. Females can.
I used the term earlier, Miss Elliott. I said, actually, maybe I didn't. Maybe I'm misremembering now. I thought I did. Woke is a term. And I wonder if you remember a time when the word woke meant something other than men wanting to dress up as women and vice versa. Because I
Yes,
know that
I
it.
remember that. I remember that. Also remember when love meant something.
Mm, mm.
Oh yeah,
Why
I
did
remember
why
that,
did
and
the,
I remember how
what did sorry, what did the word woke mean back when it was being used properly, and why is it being taken and morphed into something else and just molested?
because when I was a kid, the word woke meant you are awake now.
Mm,
You weren't asleep anymore. You were awake. You woke up. When they started to use the word woke, they wanted to say that finally society has awakened where skin color is concerned. We can finally call ourselves woke because not because we're ignoring skin color, but because we're putting skin color in the same place that we put all these other differences. It's just one more difference. It doesn't make us more than or less than. We have to wake up to the fact that skin color is not something that determines or indicates your intelligence or your worth as a human being. Being
mm,
woke is saying, hey, your skin color is important to you, and mine is important to me. But just because they're different doesn't mean that our brains are that different, or that we have to act differently, or we have to treat one another as we are more than or less than. We've got to wake up to the fact that there's only one race on the face of the earth, and there is only one skiller. It's one skin color. It's shades of brown. We won't be woke until teachers are saying to their kids, here is the Pantone skin color scale. Put your hand on this and run it along it until you find a color on this scale that matches the color on the back of your hand. And then that color is the color that you should, when you have to write your name and your color, that's the color you will use. Now you'll notice that on the Pantone skin tone scale, there is no black and there is no white. There are shades of brown. People need to get that and do that in the classroom so that every kid in the classroom would be able to say, yeah, I'm number such and such. And if you want to use the name instead of the number, you go to the thesaurus and you find the word that you think matches the color on the back of your hand. And then you take that word and go to the dictionary and look up that word. There's a way to teach ourselves out of racism. But we have to teach ourselves out of the idiocy of thinking that we are black and white and red and yellow. People do
mm,
not come in those colors. We
mm,
all come in shades of brown. And in the thesaurus, there are about 180 synonyms for brown. And there are only 20 for black and 20 for white, but over 184 synonyms for brown in the thesaurus. If you want to find out what the color of your skin is, you can find out what it is, and then you can use that color for the rest of your life instead of allowing somebody to call you black because of their ignorance. You are not the color of your hair.
mm, mm. You
You're
said
not the
something
color of your
earlier.
mustache. You're your beard. What?
You said something earlier, and I
What'd
just
you
want
say?
to make sure. I just want to make sure I understand this. You said that when Columbus got to America, that there were already brown people there waiting for him. Now, I believe that.
Well, of
I
course
agree
there.
with you. I agree with you. But there's a serious and today it's an accepted scientific school of thought. It teaches that the New World monkey, a species of monkey, of primate, uh, which are genetically related to the Old World monkey, so called, in Africa. It teaches that these monkeys traveled organically on wooden debris across from Africa, across the Atlantic, and that's how they found their way to the Americas. Now, the same people, the same experts, so called, who claim this, say that there is no evidence for African human beings having the wherewithal to do the same thing deliberately and cross the Atlantic Ocean before white people came along and carried them as slaves. What do you make of that?
Somebody said that very thing to me this week. Sent me an email telling me that he's Caucasian and white people had to come to Africa and populate Africa. And when I read it, I started to laugh because here I am looking at black writing on a white screen, and he's telling me all this ridiculous nonsense because he has to tell it and he has to believe it in order to maintain his own self-image. It makes no sense. The story that he's telling makes no sense at all. If human beings had evolved in the Caucasus Mountain region, they wouldn't have lived through the first winter. The reason we evolved in sub-Saharan Africa is because the weather, there was food, there was water, there you didn't have to have shelter. The weather was such that you wouldn't have to live through a horrible cold winter. Come on. Human beings evolved in the environment that would be best suited for human life. And that's the reason we are the way we are. I know that I'm supposed to believe that we came from the planet of the apes. Well, I know a whole lot of pale stale males who act like apes, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we evolved through apes. I think that the human being is unique. And I think we evolved in sub-Saharan Africa because everything that was necessary to sustain human life was there. And it still is.
I've heard you say something as well that I don't hear a lot of.
Okay, I'm not a scientist. I realize that, and I'm not an anthropologist. But if you have to take on the belief that we all began as apes, I have difficulty doing that. Because I think that human beings evolved. I think they evolved. I know how it feels to carry a child in my body. I did that 4 times in 5 years. I know how that happens. And I know that when those children were born, they were unique. And they still are. And so are my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren. And I think this society, people in human beings are still evolving. And eventually, our brains are going to be fit to have people listen to us. I'm not yet, but I'm working on it. And I don't think that my brain has anything to do with my gender. I think it's perfectly possible for somebody who doesn't have the same gender that you are to have a good thought or an intelligent thought. And I believe that being one of those who produces children makes me have experiences that you'll never have and that you'll never really understand. But those of us who do that have to say to ourselves, wait just a minute. Is this because of evolution? Yeah. But is it because we are from the planet of the apes? I don't think so. I think that human beings were an entirely new and different species. And I think we Homo sapiens ought to be very happy about that.
Amen. Amen. Jane, there are some people who... Hey, women. Hey, women. There are some... Oh, excuse me. There are some people who say things like, ancient Egypt was not a black civilization. What do you say to them?
Well, they were right. It wasn't black. It was a brown civilization.
I hear you. I hear you. By that, they mean, though, that people...
And you should say... But you need to say to them when they say that, thank you very much. You're finally growing up. It was a brown civilization. There are no black people. And the only reason you think they're black is because the book written about why evangelical contributions to civilization was written in black and white. Now that we have good lots and lots of colors that we can use, I believe somebody should reprint that book and print it in the colors of those people as they were, instead of black and white, like the colors, like the page and the paper. The print and the paper and black are black and white. The people they wrote about were shades of brown.
I think, but when they say that, they mean that people like me, that who look like me, could never have created the civilization of ancient Egypt, and that's what I'm really alluding to. But I've heard you elsewhere talk about this topic, and you make it quite clear that that's not the case. You talk about Nile Valley civilizations. I believe you did.
But people who look like you did start civilization. There's no doubt about it. And they outnumbered all of Peking man and Java man and Neanderthal man were outnumbered by Homo sapiens, because Homo sapiens have a higher intelligence, and they were able constantly to change the world to fit their needs.
Jane, have you ever had did you ever have the opportunity to meet I call them the big three from the 60s, Malcolm X, Muhammad Ali, or Martin Luther King?
No, I never did.
What did you make of the difference?
I watched them.
Mm.
Of what?
What did you make of the differences between Martin Luther King, the Reverend King, and Malcolm X? Because they were very different. Where the way they're portrayed, at least the way they're portrayed, is that they were very different in their approaches. What did you make of the two of those characters?
Who did the portrayals? You have to think about who did the portrayals. Were they portrayed by pale, stale male, or were they portrayed by black women who knew them, who knew about them, who knew that they produced them, who knew that they brought them from birth to death? It depends on the portrayals of people, depend on who's doing the portraying. And we can, by virtue of the printed word, turns you into something rather remarkable or turn you into nothing. And we know exactly how to do it. And with television, it's much easier than with print, because you don't have to be able to read to watch television. And the people who run television know very well that they can portray people in ways that you can't argue with, because you can't argue with the picture on the screen. And we have a whole lot of people who are screen addicted, and they'll believe what's on that screen. I think that all three of those men, because they weren't what we call white, made tremendous strides, took tremendous strides, and made tremendous progress in spite of how they were treated as black people on this earth. Imagine what they would have been had they not been treated badly because of other people's ignorance about skin color. Can you imagine? Can you just think of how many young, what we call black males, and the kinds of things they could accomplish if they didn't have to live down to teachers' expectations of them. And that's what happens in classrooms. Teachers form their expectations of that kid when they walk in the door. And they expect just this amount from that kid. And woe be unto the child, particularly the black boy, who knows more or learns more or is quicker or faster than the teacher expects him to. Teacher expectations can destroy a child, and we do it on a daily basis. I watched it happen. I watched it. The second group I did that blue-eyed, brown-eyed exercise with are in the film The Eye of the Storm. And that's the group that my principal said would never amount to anything. And then a film crew came in and filmed them going through this exercise. And that film is being used all over the world, literally all over the world. And nobody says to me, well, those are really dumb kids. They say, those kids are brilliant. And I say, yeah, they were brilliant. They were brilliant in spite of what their previous teachers said they could accomplish. They were brilliant, no doubt about it. And they went through that exercise, and ever since then, they have been different from their peers because they know something that their peers don't know. They know how it feels to be on the bottom and how it feels to be on the top, and they can make up their minds as to what they're going to be in spite of what their teachers, their previous teachers, or their neighbors or their relatives think of them. they can be what they are instead of what this society says they are. If we could, if we could, I thank God for the what we call black women that I have met in the last 55 years, because they know how to do something that most of us don't know how to do. And most of them know how to raise males to be sure of themselves and to be determined to make it. And they go through absolute hell trying to do what they're intended to do, which is to make it and to be sure of themselves. I'm absolutely amazed at how many make it in spite of what we do to them on the way to adulthood.
Mm-hmm.
There's
Jane,
something there's something in the black community that I do not see in the white community.
Jane, you were quite like I said, you became famous and a household name in the 60s and the 70s. Now, I know a tiny bit about, I mean, I had to study that period, Cold War, America. I had to study that here in the United Kingdom as part of my history in school. And one thing I remember from that era was the powers that be were very willy-nilly, very easily, like it was nobody's business. They were getting rid of anybody who posed a threat. And MLK, we've spoken about him. Malcolm X was another person. It's a surprise they didn't get to Muhammad Ali, JFK. Were you scared at all at any point when your name started getting bandied about by in the popular consciousness? Have you ever had any reason to fear for your life?
Oh, I was scared one time. I mean, really scared. I was doing a program in Uniontown, Pennsylvania, and I did a program with the teachers. All the teachers in the school system came into the gym, and I put them through a very, very short session of the blue light, brown light exercise. They were furious, absolutely furious. So when we were done, the person who brought me there took me back to my hotel in that afternoon, because I was going to give a speech in the evening. Took me back to my hotel, to my anyway, and said, we went in the room, and he said, now you go ahead and rest. I'm going to stay here. I said, why? He said, I'm going to stay here. I'm not going to leave you alone. You go ahead and rest. I'm going to sit right here. You'll be fine. So I thought, I'm not going to sit in the room with a young male of color all afternoon until this evening. So I sat down and we visited. And I learned a lot just visiting with him. When it was time to leave, the car pulled up in front of the building, and he walked to the door and he looked out the peephole in the door and he said, stand behind me. So I stood behind him. He said, now stay right there. And he opened, he opened the door a bit, and he said, now the car door is open. You get in the front door of the car and you run and get in the front door of that car. And I thought, what the devil are you? He said, run. And he pushed me out of the door, across the sidewalk, and into the car door, which the car was parked parallel to the sidewalk, and the front door was open and the back door was open, so that those two doors made a protected place for me to run through. And I got in the car, and they slammed both those doors. He got in the back seat behind the driver. I sat in the front seat by the driver, and I turned and looked at him, and he had his hand inside an open briefcase on his lap. And the driver's like this, nervous. And so they take me to the next thing, and we stop at this brownstone place. And, he said, now, pulled up parallel to the sidewalk again. He said, now, he slid across, he opened the door. He got out and he said, now, you slide across the seat and run up those steps. So I slid across this under the steering wheel, slid across the seat, and ran up the steps into this building. There were a whole bunch of people in this building, all of them just like this, just really. Oh. And they said, now, we've got to get her to Harrisburg. You get in your car and you go with them, and this woman is going to drive her to Harrisburg. You are going to go in the front, and that's going to be a carload in front and two carloads in back in case anything happens to her. And I'm thinking, what is the matter with you people? And they opened the door and they said, now run down the steps and get in that car. So I don't take off. I don't take commands very well, but I ran down the steps and I got in that car. And after we'd been in the car a little while, I said to the woman who was driving, what's going on here? She said, we've got to get you out of town. I said, why? She said, because the teachers called the superintendent after you were done. They said, if you don't get that bitch out of town, we're going to shoot her. I said, oh, well, I understand that. And I started to laugh. She says, not funny. Anna S. Cunningham was her name. She was head of the NAAC, as head of, anyway, the Human Rights Division in Pennsylvania at that time. I said, okay. So we got to the interstate.
What does the future hold for all of us now? Black, white, tan. You spoke about Donald T. Rump earlier. The people elected him a second time, and you've seen some of the things he's been doing since he's been elected a second time. Is the future bleak? Is it positive? What does the future hold?
It's positive, and I'll tell you why. Because people who are brown and dark brown are quickly becoming the numerical majority in the United States of America. That's a fact. You have always been the numerical majority worldwide. Only 15 to 18% of the world's human population is classified as white. And that's a misnomer. We are not white. We are all shades of brown. And very quickly now, these young people who are coming up are going to realize that if you want to live in the future in this on this land on which the sun's rays are getting stronger and stronger because of our white misuse of technology. The hole in the ozone layer gets larger and larger. More and more sunlight is allowed to enter our environment. More and more people who look like me are going to die because they don't have melanoma, because they don't have enough melanin in their skin to protect their cells from the damaging rays of the sun. Now, the future of the earth depends on people who look like you, because you have enough melanin to survive as this environment gets less and less friendly to those who are pale skinned. People in this country, pale faces, are going to be saying to their children, marry color, because I want my grandchildren to live a long time. And that's exactly what is going to solve this problem. People are going to get smart, and they're going to look at those who have lived a long time and who are still here in spite of everything we have done to destroy them, because nature is in favor of people who look like you. You have protection from the dangerous rays of the sun that I don't have. But I have several great grandchildren, one who is what they call black, but my grandson isn't allowed to call him black. I won't tolerate that. I have one who is Hispanic, and I have two who are Saudi Arabian. They don't look like the people around them. They look like the people who were here first. They look like the future is going to be in the hands of people who look like you. And that's the way it is. And a whole lot of pale, stale males are terribly frightened because of that. That is why Donosaurus T. Rump is successful, because he appeals to people's fear about what those people are going to do if they get power. Well, it isn't those people, because those people are us. We are all part of that race, the human race that comes in shades of brown.
Jane, you've taught me so much in just so little time. I wish we could just go on and on and on and on, but I'm be so blessed by our conversation. Thank you so much, ma'am, for doing this with me. Any last words before I end the show?
Yeah, just remember that Jesus was a man of color, that he had kinky woolly hair and feet of bronze. Remember that when you see the next picture of the crucifixion and you see that white man hanging there. Jesus wasn't white, and Jesus didn't have long flowing hair. He had kinky woolly hair, and he looked like you with hair. Just remember that and teach that to your children and grandchildren, nieces and nephews, and anybody else you come across, because it's time for us to get rid of the lie.